Hi, good morning, everyone. And as always, thank you for joining our webinar series. If you joined one or two of the previous events for this topic, um, we'll recap those in a moment, but this will be next generation 911 services, focusing on government. So we'll get started here and we'll sort of talk about what we're going to accomplish today. As you can see, I mentioned the past couple of events. If you didn't get to attend, or if you want to see those recordings again, you can see that link right there. And today we are focusing on advanced next generation 911 services. We'll have introductions in a moment. Jake will talk a little bit about the part 1 and 2 recap that I mentioned. And again, we'll focus on next generation services. And as far as Q&A, we can absolutely handle those at the end of the event. But if you do have questions before then, go ahead and put those in the question or chat box. If we don't get to it today, those are recorded, so we'll make sure we get back to you. My name is Joe Paquette. I'm the Director of Business Development in the Northeast for New Era. And one of my roles here is to help bring our message out to clients from our partners. 911 has been a very important topic for us. We have a lot of customers that rely upon their phone systems greatly. And Jake and Mark have been a big part of this outreach to clients. So with Jake, I'll turn it over to you for a second.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. My name is Jake Damphouse. I'm channel manager, excuse me, with 911 Inform. Unfortunately, Mark Fletcher will not be able to join us today, but I've been working with Joe and the New Era team over the past few months, really to create a really solid partnership and bring our solutions into their product line. And over the past few weeks, we've done a couple sets of webinars, kind of wrapping up today, and really excited to talk about what the capabilities of Next Gen 911 are. So, Joe.
Great, thanks, Jake. So a little bit about us if you're new to New Era. We have 40 offices worldwide. You can see 1,600 plus employees. Now I think it's up to 1,800 plus since this sheet was made. If I could leave you with anything, we really have an infrastructure of technicians, engineers, installers that can help support your organization all the way from where we are today, the research education phase, through implementation and post support of a solution. And Jake, if you just go to the next slide, we'll see graphically some of the areas we're talking about. Today, we're focusing on that collaboration UC space as well as security, line safety. But just know again, we have a very strong practice group in data networking, so networking, firewall stuff, Microsoft, and also a whole suite of services around cloud offerings, our Cloud Blue services, and traditional managed and professional services. So with that, Jake, I really look forward to today's content. I've seen this a couple times and I think it has a huge impact. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joe. So today's topic really stems off of what's capable after the 911 call or emergency has begun. And I'm going to recap sort of what we talked about in the first few webinars. It may be some rehash if you haven't joined us before. It may be new to you, but I think it's really important to look at this as sort of the end-to-end, what happens from location of devices and understanding where those emergencies are happening, all the way through to the response and the effort to, provide some management and response management to that emergency. So if we look at what we kind of talked about from part 1 and 2 of these webinars, we started off with the legislation, and I'll go into a deep dive on, or a quick recap, I'm sorry, on the legislation and what those laws entail. But then from that, what those laws require is device location discovery, and we sort of talked about how we use different network forensics and our own application, 911 Inform LDS, to solve for those issues and create a valid and efficient way to manage that task. And then briefly towards the end of that second session, we talked about E911 and NG911 and what data goes to public safety once a 911 call or other emergency is created. So if you look back at the legislation, really everything started with the incident that happened with Carrie Hunt, where she was murdered in that hotel room in Texas. And from that stemmed Carrie's Law, which required direct access to 911 without the prefix of a 9. So 911 needs to go directly to public safety. And then it also required an on-site notification. And the reason behind that is with that incident with Carrie Hunt, her 9-year-old daughter tried to dial 911 4 times. And there was no one in the building that was aware that that emergency was happening until much later. So that on-site notification provides at least some detail and some information for someone on site so that an internal response can begin before even public safety is dispatched. What pushed it further was Ray-Bombs Act. There are 2 phases. One is wired, one is wireless. Wired went into effect this past January. Wireless goes into effect this coming January. And really the meat of Ray-Bombs Act is that there is a dispatchable location involved with the call that has to be sent both on site and to public safety at the time of the call. So when we went through the device location and using those different network forensics in LDS to determine where those devices are, we're basically aiming to create that dispatchable location so that when those devices call, there is valid and useful information that is being attached to the call. So just a quick overview and rehash of what the dispatchable location actually is. And I think it's important because as we talk about E911 versus NG911, the information that's being sent to public safety is somewhat varied. So when we talk about dispatchable location as the street address plus additional information that could be used to locate the calling party in a reasonable amount of time. If we look at it from the E911 perspective, where we just have those 20 characters of text-based information to really locate the caller, you have that basic street address, but then that 20 characters to really dig down and say, okay, it's Suite C, room 231. With the next gen 911 solution and capabilities, we have the ability to send floor plans, interactive multimedia data through to 911 and public safety to really provide specific and granular information as far as where that call is coming from. And now we've talked about it, but what does it really look like in a live environment, right? And the capabilities kind of really start to grow when we start to talk about that multimedia and interactive capability. Things like video camera surveillance, door access control, AI technologies like weapons detection, gunshot detection. Over the past year, we've come in contact with facial recognition. Some even have temperature sensors. All these technologies are out there and they're capable. And over the past decade or so, much of the US has been upgrading their security and technology within their organizations. But the issue that kind of arises is most of these technologies are on siloed systems. You have the camera system, you have a door system, often, but not all the time. And in order to use these in the event of an emergency, you have to actually have control and access to these prior to the emergency that's happening. So what we really do is create an aggregate for all these emergency triggers, whether it's 911 calls from one of your devices. It can be a 911 call from a cell phone, a personally owned cell phone, weapons detection, panic buttons, whatever they may be. And we take all these triggers and aggregate them down into the 911 Inform platform to then create a consistent and easily consumed data source, and then make it actionable. So that screen that we saw earlier with the floor plan, provide that information so that we prevent these siloed systems from being, okay, this person has access to cameras, a separate person is the one that's running doors, and make sure that all of that information is usable and accessible during an emergency. Also in the past, we've had basically just a one-way data stream, and there are some solutions out there that can do this where you send information to public safety, but there's really no flow of information back. What we do is create a bi-directional communication path where video, door access control, floor plans, and additional information can be sent to public safety. And then public safety also has the ability to send back the information that they've gathered and that they have while an emergency is going on. So they may have additional information based on the call itself, or additional information about where dispatchable resources are and in response to the emergency. What that all kind of looks like is everything that's put on a single pane of glass is accessible during the emergency. So it can be accessed while the emergency is going on. And again, we are a solution agnostic. So really, we're just an integrator. We're not trying to, say, hey, we actually use these cameras and this specific door. We take what you have in place today and tie it in and put it on that single pane of glass. So if we talk a little bit about the platform itself, and really the goal of what that single pane of glass looks like, the platform is a web-based platform. We don't need to go in and have you download software to the devices that are going to be notified, or use an application for specific emergencies. It's a completely web-based platform, which in turn makes it very easily accessible. Those notifications, again, they go out via SMS, text message, email. We can install some software if you have like a security operations center, to basically create a desktop screen alert. If there is an emergency, it can pop open that screen on a specific desktop or station. And it's a secure platform. And I'll dive into sort of the flow and the information access once we wrap up an event. But with those SMS and email notifications, each event is its own unique link. So from emergency to emergency, they'll have their own unique emergency platform, if you would, and those are only accessible to those who are invited. Once those events are closed out, those people who are invited in will no longer have any access. So if we look at it from 30,000 feet and we're looking at a campus where there's multiple buildings, you may have open areas like parking lots or open fields. If we think back to that E911 versus NG911, from a text-based perspective, to notify public safety and those on-site officials, to provide 20 characters of information to just determine the building, let alone specific information about where the emergency could be happening within the building, it's kind of tough within those 20 characters. So with the ability to send along these, overhead views of the campus, multiple building scenarios, not only can we highlight the actual building from where that call is coming from, but then we can dig deeper and we can identify, okay, this is the specific room, this is the specific access route that probably gets me to that emergency quicker than if I went through just maybe the front door. And it also, again, provides that, this is the door that emergency is closest to. Included within the platform itself is a common chat platform. So as we've talked about that bi-directional communication, everyone that's invited to the event, whether it be internal security teams or administrators and public safety, so this could be law, fire, EMS, the 911 center, or the PSAP, All those that are involved with the event have the ability to share and relay information across the specific event. So as you can see in this example, public safety has learned that this is a heart attack and it is confirmed to be in room D. Those dispatchable resources are mentioning that they're responding. They'll be there within 5 minutes. And then those on-site teams are notifying those that were involved that there's someone on site that's medically trained. They're providing assistance until those dispatchable resources arrive at the scene. So it creates that path of information. Obviously, with a medical emergency, this is kind of how it could play out. If you had something a little bit more threatening, like a active shooter or a lockdown, constant updates could be provided as the event unfolds. A point that I like to make is, we've shown these floor plans, we've shown kind of these campus map features and part of the notifications. And those digitized floor plans are part of our service. We go in, we digitize these floor plans because they serve multiple purposes, and they also serve really important when it comes to notification. They give landmarks and references to those who may not be familiar with your facilities. And then they also create the ability to identify specific emergency assets that may be within your building. Things like AEDs, place those live camera feeds on a map. So if the emergency is coming from room D, you can reach over and click on that camera, maybe get some situational awareness. Things like fire extinguishers, and these are really not limited to, AEDs, fire extinguishers, things like that. We can really mark any asset that you may have within your facility, things like hazardous materials, defibrillators, things like that. So if someone's responding, they're not super familiar with your facility, they can at least be aware of what's at their disposal or what they have to be cautious of. So as we dive into those cameras and access, these are under 1 second of latency, they're low bandwidth. We've actually heard stories of public safety and police officers being able to reach over on their Toughbook and their cruiser, click on 3 or 4 of these, 5 of these at a time, and pull them open as almost like a mobile command center, just to gain some situational awareness as far as, okay, the emergency's happening in room D. If I have a camera that's in room D, maybe I can understand what the situation is looking like before I've even arrived at the scene. Door access control is another popular integration that we see. If you think of a facility that may be locked on the weekends, you have a couple people that have come in to work on the weekend or doing some maintenance, and if something were to happen and the EMTs, for a medical emergency, EMT rolls up to that facility and that door is locked, they then have the capability to reach over on their smartphone or tablet, whatever they're using, if they've been invited in, and unlock that door so that they can get to that person and provide medical attention. And then they can lock that door back behind them.
Hey, Jake, I just wanted to, do you mind going to the previous slide for a second?
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to sort of interject and share information we're getting with meetings with clients, and I think you stated this, but I'll restate this. Part of your service is to digitize these plans. So if the customers don't have that today, they don't have to worry about that and think, oh my goodness, how can I get that in my environment? So number one, you'll do these plans, correct?
Yep. So what we do basically, we have an entire maps team. These are actually, they look pretty simple. There's some back end things that go into it. So the rooms actually have their own unique identifiers. But what we'll take is anything from a fire escape plan, just to gauge the general sense of, what the building layout is, what these room names are. We're not looking for architectural diagrams or anything like that. We've actually done some maps based on hand drawn on a napkin outlines of a building. We really just need to identify general areas that are small enough to understand where those emergencies are. So all that you see on the screen here, that's done by our internal maps team.
Great, thank you. And the second part of that was going to be sometimes this information can seem overwhelming when we're talking about the door security systems and all of the AEDs and everything else. And sometimes folks think, geez, how am I going to share that information with local public safety? Just know that once that information is available in the system, they have access to the same location discovery platform or infrastructure that we'll be using with this. So when Jake mentioned the officer on his mobile device looking at that information or communicating back and forth, that's part of the platform. So again, Jake, I just want to make sure folks don't get concerned that, oh my goodness, I have to now do these things over here, which we aren't doing today.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. I think the point to make is also that this is already the capability for this is already widely rolled out. It's already in PSAPs or 911 centers that cover 93% of the population. And if there is the off chance that there is the gap where that isn't rolled out, it is completely free to public safety. So from that perspective, it's not there's nothing that the organization necessarily has to do in order to provide this to public safety directly. The capability is already there, and they will be trained in order to how to use it.
Great, thank you.
So as we it's a good transition point. As we talk about what the capabilities are within the platform for public safety, most of the features that we've sort of gone over so far are certainly available to those internal responding teams. But what we've also added are some additional features that we've worked with SWAT teams and tactical police units to understand what tools could we provide that would maybe aid your response, provide a little clarity and streamline some of the procedures that you run when you do have a major incident to respond to. And the first was really clearing out buildings, and room-to-room clearing is one of the tougher tasks that they have to encounter. And really what we've provided is a digitized version. So as an event sort of unfolds, the clearing buildings process is digitized so that room to room, as one gets cleared, they can radio back to the command center and say, hey, room A, B, C are clear. All it requires is basically they click on those rooms, and then everyone that's involved in the event from public safety side is now informed that these green rooms are clear. Anyone that may need medical attention could potentially get that now that those rooms are deemed clear. So really just streamlines that. You could clear the building pretty quickly rather than having to communicate throughout the entire team as far as which one and which rooms are clear. We've also added what's called battleship mode. It's essentially puts the grid or a grid system over the entire map, and it allows public safety to mark really finite points on the map, and the points that they can mark are pretty unlimited. You could put a bomb, you can mark it as a potential bomb, and create a radius for all those who are responding to stay away from, all the way through creating a mobile command site in the parking lot that they want to determine, okay, this is where our headquarters are going to be stationed for the time being. This will let everyone know this is where they need to report to. So basically a grid system to allow specific markings on the map to be translated across the entire emergency response. So as I had mentioned earlier, the security of the platform is obviously of high value to us. We're connecting to some of those technologies that And oftentimes you don't want 24/7 access to things like cameras and doors. So all that technology is really only available during the emergency response. And it's only available to those who have been invited into it. So a user may be a 911 inform user, but if they were not tasked to respond to that specific event, they will not have access to any of that information either. Once an event is closed out, those links that previously granted access to the platform will no longer do so. It basically provides a blank screen, and if there is another emergency at any point, that specific link that is sent out will be completely unique. So from emergency to emergency, it's only accessible by those who have that link and who've been invited in. After an event has closed, and after action reports are generated by the system itself, each action taken by each user is documented, and we can create timelines or cleared room logs, things like that, so that after an event is finished, you could kind of look back and say, okay, this is how our response looked. These are the steps that were taken, and we can maybe improve upon some procedures or document that these are our best practices and kind of try to repeat those moving forward. And I think the last point, it's not necessarily restricted to within the event of an emergency, but just something to note that we do have a mass notification solution built in. Obviously, we need to notify during an emergency, but we often see that some of our customers use this for non-emergency events, things like snow day closings, COVID alerts, even some marketing, reminders for those users within the organization. It has the ability to send 64,000 text messages and emails per minute. So it's pretty robust for most organizations in order to send those notifications out. And I think it was just another additional value to make a note of. It does not have to be only used during an emergency. It can be used outside of emergency events. Notifications can be pre-saved or created at the ad hoc and sent out at that current time, or can be timed out to send later on in the day or the week. So I'll hand it back to Joe to kind of wrap this up, but I wanted to thank everyone who's on this, who's kind of stuck with us throughout the group of webinars. If this is your first one, as Joe had mentioned, there are a few that we had already done, and those links are available on the New Era website.
Great, thanks, Jake. As always, great content. I think what I'll share at the end, and we can see the slide with the offering, the formal offering, but where we've seen value in this process is just that. It's the process of bringing the different folks in organizations together to have this meeting. So what I've seen a lot of so far is within different groups of the organization: security, physical security, operations, IT, safety. Everyone seems to have an agreement that 911 is important for sure, but everyone's not on the same page relative to how we get there, what the plan is, the understanding of it, the association of a budget to it. And what we have seen is these meetings are great because invariably brings all of those groups together, and it creates the same baseline for everyone to work from. So on the survey form, you can check off to have this discovery meeting. In the process, we'll have this 1 hour meeting we're talking about. We'll discuss your current environment. We'll go through what a 911 call looks like today, see where those gaps might be. I can also share with you on some of these calls, we find out that all you need to do is change some process and you're fine. So, moving forward with the bill of materials is not needed. But again, it's the process of doing these meetings that become very valuable. Jake, would you add anything as far as what you've seen to date on those meetings?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well, involving those different groups. Obviously, with state and local government, there is somewhat of a unique relationship that comes with public safety versus, general enterprise. So to get those parties involved, to understand what they're looking for, what they can use, has been pretty beneficial for everyone involved to get on the same page and move forward to understand exactly what could be useful for their environment.
Great, thanks, Jake. So with that, everyone, once again, thanks for attending today. If you have any questions, you can see the email on the screen or reach out to your rep or myself. Again, thanks to Jake and the team at 911 Inform. This is an important topic, as I mentioned, and partnering with them has been fantastic to get this message out. If you do have questions, as I mentioned, reach out to your team, and everyone have a great weekend, and thanks for attending. Take care.